Hey guys, and welcome back to Sasquatch Theory. I hope everyone is doing good and enjoying the channel. I have a few interviews that I needed to put out there, and for a while now, I try to post the videos that I felt were the most exciting and the biggest hits for the channel. And that is anybody with a Bigfoot encounter. That's what I'm looking for, people who have seen these things with their own eyes. When I no longer have any more encounter interviews, I go into my interview folder and pull the most exciting second-class sighting, or as some like to say, Class B sightings. You know, where a person hears the activity and finds the sign, but doesn't actually see the creature. I try so hard to keep the channel exciting and on topic. That's the most important thing to me. Now, I want people to understand that videos I post have been picked by me personally after interviewing and talking to many people. So in this episode, the gentleman starts off with his Sasquatch encounter, and I felt the interview was going really good. And then we kind of got off really deep into the paranormal. After that, John started quoting the Bible, and I felt the interview really started getting off topic. Hey, I am a Christian, but at the same time, I'm not trying to turn Sasquatch Theory into a religious and political channel. I also don't want to try to enforce that on people either. If you want to look into that yourself, you can, but I want to stick to a certain niche, and that's Bigfoot. When I go out of my way to contact people, I want to hear their own personal encounters and experiences, and basically I want to put myself in their shoes and relive their experiences. I will be honest, and it kind of bothers me a little bit, but it's okay. I get an influx of people who want to talk about other people's work or TV shows, and that's not why I contact people. I don't have the time to talk about David Paulides or Scott Carpenter. They're great guys, awesome work, but I can't represent them on my channel. I just don't have the time to talk about the same thing over and over and over, and it seems like a lot of people want to contact me to talk about their work, and you know, I've said the wrong things before and made people mad, and I apologize for that. I just didn't purchase all this gear, start an original channel to make my channel about other YouTubers and consistently talk about their work. I am just simply not going to talk about the missing 411 over and over with everyone I talk to. That's not my work, and I'm not going to represent them, and I don't know them. It's okay to mention them, I don't care, but to spend 40 minutes to hours talking about that same topic with each person I talk to, it's hard to weave around all that and try to find people with original Bigfoot encounters. Okay, so nothing against those guys or their work. I know they're great people for the most part, but yes, I'm looking for real life Bigfoot encounters that no one has ever heard before. I've gotten myself into conversations in the past about these other groups, and honestly, I have seen all the same shows as you guys. I have YouTube as well, and it seems like people find these YouTube videos and they want to come on here and talk about them, but I didn't start Sasquatch Theory to follow other people. You know, I'm trying to get Bigfoot evidence, I'm pursuing Sasquatch in real life, and I just don't have time to talk about third-hand stories and other TV shows and their work. So if I have offended anyone in the past about not wanting to talk about these guys, I apologize. Kind of, but seriously, I have all this gear, an original channel. We don't need to talk about these other groups and miseducate people, okay? There are some people who follow those channels that kind of ridicule people in my comments and say things like researchers are morons and the BFRO can't be trusted. I don't know anything about that, and I don't know why there is so many people like that who hate researchers all of a sudden. I think anyone who talks about Bigfoot daily is a researcher, no matter how they look at it. No matter what your belief is, we are all human, and we can all agree that Bigfoot exists, okay? So in this interview, don't think I'm trying to be rude or a little devil, but I just had to try to stop him so I could hear his actual experiences. As an interviewer, when people start deviating from their story or the topic, it does make me question a person, okay? So I hope everyone understands why I stopped him and try to reel him back in for the interview. The channel is called Sasquatch Theory. I do have to stick to a niche, which is Bigfoot. I guess the theory part throws people off a little. I don't really care to get people on the show who just want to talk about their beliefs and far out theories. I am looking for Bigfoot encounters and first-hand experiences. I think everyone will understand, and I know that's why you guys subscribed to this channel, was to hear about Bigfoot stories. I get that a lot of people speculate that it's all connected, but I'm looking for actual evidence, photos, stories, things that people personally experienced, things we can see, touch, hear, and smell. Okay, so I know the spiritual stuff is going on, but I just want to stick onto the topic of what the person actually experienced. No matter what, me and John got along, and it was a really good interview. We both shared our paranormal experiences together and talked about Bigfoot. John's interview made it to the channel because he seems like a really smart guy. He was a great speaker, and he was a very polite person. The viewers will also have to remember that just because somebody else mentions something on my channel doesn't mean that's what I believe, but I'm always open to hearing whatever people have to say. And you have to be respectful and kind of sensitive. That's just how it works. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy this interview. It covers a lot of the spiritual and paranormal side of the spectrum. So let's dive straight in and hear John's Bigfoot story and his paranormal experiences. Hey John, and welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Miguel. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Excited to hear your encounters and your experiences. If you could, tell me a little bit about yourself and your encounters that you've experienced.
Sure. My name's John Kenny. I'm from Ohio, and basically the reason I contacted you is, of course, I had the sighting, and like we spoke before, my spiritual warfare experiences too, combined with that, led me to start a spiritual warfare ministry in which I try to support people that have had or struggling with sleep paralysis, seeing shadow people, and whatnot. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. And it struck me as odd that subject about cryptids and Sasquatch kept coming up, because a lot of the people that I help also have had experiences like that, right? Kind of fringe experiences, not always a Sasquatch, but they have fringe experiences with, experiences they can't explain with entities that just don't make any sense, right? And it got me kind of thinking about the sighting that I had where I'm convinced that I seen a Sasquatch. Before I was reluctant to tell everyone who I was with, because it was actually my sister, but she's recently passed away. So I can go ahead and tell it and let everybody know, because she was, after this experience off and on, she's had nightmares and stuff. And I kind of didn't want people bothering her about it and asking her about, hey, what did you and John see and stuff. So I left her name out of it, because she just really didn't seem like she would talk about it with me, but I don't think that she wanted to experience the possible ridicule that other people would have for saying stuff like that. And but anyways, we'll just start with the Sasquatch experience that we had, or what I think's a Sasquatch. Anyways, you guys can, your viewers, I'll read the comments. Maybe they can kind of explain it better, and that's actually why I contacted you, was just to get more information about what I was experiencing and how that could correlate. But anyways. So I would borrow her car, right? And I would drop her off at work. This is in Doylestown, Ohio. Some of your viewers might be familiar with that. There's a lot of Bigfoot stuff that happens in Ohio, right? So she was working at a drive-through called Charlie's. This is like in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. She's working at a drive-through called Charlie's out there. And I'd drop her off at work, and I would take her car and go run around and do whatever I want. Come back and pick her up about 10:30, 11 o'clock, or whenever the drive-through closed, right? So I drive back and I pick her up. And oftentimes after I would pick her up, we would just go cruising around, listen to music. We were really into grunge, and we'd just drive around. It was a nice summer night. It's about 72 degrees outside, perfect. Some moonlight out there. I mean, it was just an absolute beautiful night. And we come down that hill on the way back to Norton. I can't remember. I think maybe the name of the road is Eastern Road. But we came down that hill and made a right, and we're working our way through kind of like the back country back there. Actually, we're working our way to Eastern Road. I can't remember the name of that road, but we're working our way to Eastern Road, right? And we get down there, and I'll mention that because the people from that area might be familiar. Anyways, we make a left, and we start heading towards 21, right? And I think we're on Eastern Road. But if I drove out there, I could show you exactly where it is. But, I mean, this is probably like, 20 years ago, so I can't remember the name of the road, and I haven't been out in that area. But anyways, there are cornfields on our right. We're just driving, talking back and forth, and just out of like the corner of my eye at first, I see this like big thing, and it looked like black, and it was kind of, I don't know if it was moving is why I kind of look at it. It seems like that's what it was, but it attracted my attention. And I didn't have to say anything. It attracted her attention too. And we're like, man, you know, what's that? And we're cruising about 25, 30 mile an hour. And the first time we noticed it, we were maybe like, I don't know, thinking back, probably about 50 yards from it, because we just seen it kind of like down by a ditch line, because you've got the road and you kind of go down into like this little ditch line, and then there's about 12 or 15 feet, and then a cornfield starts, and it was in between the ditch line and the cornfield, okay? And then we see it, it's like it looks our way, and we see its eyes are red. And that's when I first got started, and I'm like, man, what the hell is that, you know? And we drove by. We maintained speed. She was driving, and as we drove by it, it's like we could not believe our eyes, man. There was this thing that looked like it was 6.5, 7 foot tall, and it was covered in like mangy looking hair, and it looked like it was matted in dirt or grease or something. And its eyes were huge, and its eyes were red. And at first, I think that I probably thought that the red eye shine was like from our headlights, like if you catch a deer the right way, you'll get that eye shine. Mm-hmm. But when we got up beside it and our headlights had passed it, I'm looking over at it out the window, and I'm starting to lean back into her to like get just out of instinct to get away from it. And I could see this thing. I was like 20 feet from this thing, and it was down on the other side of the ditch, and the ditch line was it was lower than the road, okay? So I'm guessing the thing was about 7 foot tall, and its eyes looked like they were, now it was glowing, so I think because of the glow, the eyes looked bigger than they actually were, but they looked like they were the size of like the bottom of a pop can, man. And they were glowing like a red glow, you know, and I had no frame of reference for what I seen. I just knew that it was big, it was hairy, I could see the outline, and it looked like mangy, matted hair, and I seen its eyes. And I mean, at that point, like I said, I'm starting like to lean over to her, and I'm telling her, you know, go get the F out of here, you know, punch it, get us out of here, because we're both freaked out, and she did. And about the same time I said that, she was getting into the pedal to get us out of there, right? Like I said, I had no idea what that was. I had no frame of reference for that. And I think what made me go back and even think about it before is like that Richard Gere Mothman movie came out, right? And in that movie, and like the lore around Mothman had red glowing eyes. So that got me kind of in the cryptid thing. And one thing led to another, and that led me to the Ohio Grassman. And then I started reading accounts of other people that encountered a Sasquatch, because I didn't know that people who encountered Sasquatch, the Sasquatch had glowing red eyes. I didn't know that was an account other people had. I thought it was mainly like a man-ape kind of thing, and most of the encounters were like the Patterson-Gimlin footage, in which there was nothing necessarily supernatural about it. So the supernatural part of it sparked my interest, and it made me wonder just how on earth could things like that, how on earth could people be seeing those things, and people that don't know each other, and people like me, because this was before the internet was really big. There are people like me that didn't know what other people were seeing, but we're all kind of reporting the same things. Like, you know, it's not the same every time, but as I'm sure you've heard, there are many accounts of Sasquatch-type beings having, like, the glowing red eyes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard it many times.
And if someone asked me to describe it, and like we talked before, you want me to try to give you as much detail as I can. It didn't look like it had much of a neck. It had big, broad shoulders. It was about 7 foot tall, and it stood as still as it could. Like it thought that if it didn't move, we couldn't see it. You know what I mean? And its hair was really like stringy and mangy looking, and it looked like it had stuff stuck in its fur. Now, in other accounts of people, they say that they smell like feces or urine mixed with like a dead body. We didn't smell anything. And it was 72 degrees outside, and I could smell nothing. So that surprised me too, and I don't understand how I got that close to that being, and I couldn't smell it, but other people say that they could smell it. Now, I've heard some theories out there. People say that maybe that's something like a pheromone or something they can put off, or it would work almost like a skunk spray somebody to get people to stay away from it. I don't know, but I know that it was a warm summer night, 72, beautiful outside, and I couldn't smell it, but I surely seen it, and it had red glowing eyes. And that is just, that's probably, this happened, like I said, around 99, 2000, around that time. I'm not sure. I was probably 19, 20 years old, right? And like we talked before, and you wanted me to give some examples of like the spiritual warfare I've experienced, is a little off topic, but I think a lot of people that follow this stuff, because I myself, and I've got people in my group that said, okay, well, I've never seen a shadow person, and I had never had sleep paralysis until I started going on Bigfoot hunts, and they feel like it's something in the woods attached to them, and whatever followed them home wasn't necessarily in the shape or form of a Bigfoot, but it's like a shadow person, and now they're having sleep paralysis, and during sleep paralysis, they're feeling pressure on their chest, and some would report like this entity that people would call a hat man, right? And that's what that led me to contact you, because it kept coming up in my group, okay? And as far as like the spiritual warfare experiences that I personally had that led me to start my ministry, the most profound is I was lying in bed, and I was having like a sleep paralysis experience, but I was not asleep at all, okay? I was woken up out of sleep, and there is this entity made of black mist on top of me. I can only see it from about the lower part of its chest down, right? This being was made of a black, misty, spiritual material, and it moved, right? Like this, it looked like black smoke, and it moved quickly and whipped around this thing's face. And it had like its face, from what I was seeing, the easiest way for me to explain it, I don't think I was seeing it in this dimension. I think I was seeing it in the spirit dimension, right? And this thing's face looked like features, like it had serpentine features, like no nose. Like a lot of people will see like a hooded entity, and they say that it's a skull, like a skull face with a hooded entity on it. I could see how someone could see something like what I saw and think that it was a skull, but I've seen it so clearly because it looked like if you took someone's face and took like a bed sheet or saran wrap around their face, and you hugged it as tightly on their face as you could, as you could, and you were trying to make out its features on the other side of the saran wrap, that's like what I was seeing. And it had like serpentine features, like a small nub for a nose. It had a big wide smile. It was smiling at me, and I could not see any eyes. It was just looked like, you know, it was just black made out of mist like the rest of it, and the thing had a hood, right? And I'm a Christian, right? And like in my flesh, I felt absolutely terrified. I could feel the dread coming off of this being, right? But I also felt like the Holy Spirit in me was giving me strength, so I wasn't so afraid that I didn't like black out or something, you know? And like I started, based on the confidence that I believe I was getting from the Holy Spirit, I started talking, like telling this thing, get off of me. If I could, you know, I mean, I'll kind of Christianize it a little bit, but I was cussing at it. If I could, I'd kick your, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I was saying all the things that I would say to somebody, like if I was in a street fight and I wanted to intimidate him, right? And then this thing, all of a sudden, and at this point, it's just like smiling at me. Then all of a sudden, I get ripped out of my body, okay? And I've got my bed, and then at the end of my bed is my TV stand and is my desk, okay? And like when this thing pulled me out of my body and I left my body, I left this reality and entered what I believe from study, I now come to understand, that would be like the etheric world. Because my desk and my TV were made out of what looked like a white misty material, and I could go right through it. Because it had me like down to my navel through, like my desk is right by my TV stand. Like my stomach was like half in my desk and half in my TV stand. And just as quickly as that thing pulled me out of the body, which was rapid, it's like I was sucked back up right into my body. Like God said, no, you can lie. It's almost like I think the thing was trying to drag me to hell or something, right? I think it was trying to kill me. And I snapped back into my body almost like, you know, like a carpenter's got like I don't know what the technical term is, but carpenters have like the retractable ruler things, and you can dish it out about 12 foot and then let it go and it comes flying back and snaps back in your hand. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. And I just was sucked right back up into my body. I woke up immediately, and I knew immediately what happened to me. I had recollection of the whole event, and it was not a dream experience, even though I've had lucid dreams and I've had visions and whatnot. This was not that. I was wide awake in another dimension. Now, I know that's hard to believe. People can take that story for what it will, believe it if you don't believe it. Maybe you've had a similar experience, and I'm excited to read the comments if and when you post this video to see if other people have been in that like etheric realm where most of it is pretty much like black, but the things that are in existence in our realm are made out of like that white, etheric looking material, right? And another thing that prompted my interest in following this Sasquatch stuff is the people that see Sasquatch, oftentimes they report, well, the stuff that I read, okay? I've noticed, I pick up on it because that's my experience. Because when you're experiencing spiritual warfare, in my experience, you'll get buzzing in your ears. It's almost like the air gets thick with static when one of these beings are around. And like I said, there's buzzing in the air. It's almost like there's an electricity in the air. People feel a sense of confusion. They feel fear, intense fear or dread that is not logical. Like you're not seeing anything with your eyes that would tell your brain to be afraid, but you're just afraid for the sake of being afraid. Like your spiritual instincts are kicking in, letting you know something's evil around you. And then when I started seeing it come back in my group, I started to research it further, right? And in my experience, and I believe I have a biblical worldview. Now I know that's not necessarily popular, and you have a lot of people out here that really want nothing to do with biblical Christianity, not because they've ever really researched it or given it a chance, but just because that's the spirit of the world towards Christianity today, in my opinion and experience. Okay, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but that's just been my experience. Most people, they're going to stay away from it unless they think they need you for something, right? Like if they're experiencing spiritual warfare, okay, they'll give you a chance. Let me hear what you got to say because I need to resolve my situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but I look at it from a spiritual perspective, okay? And I'm trying to dig in the Bible and find something in the Bible that substantiates these beings that exist, okay? Because if you take the basic Christian narrative out here from the prosperity gospel, they have literally no account for supernatural beings like that, in my opinion. Now, they'll account for angelic encounters, and you've got deliverance ministries, but as far as the spiritual aspects of Bigfoot sightings and shadow people and sleep paralysis and Hat Man, they've got no answer. I even contacted deliverance ministries when I was going through my spiritual warfare, and I didn't understand any of this. I just knew that I couldn't sleep at night. I was being attacked in my sleep, pulled out of body, seeing shadow people, seeing like beings made of mist that were in the form of a cloud that were sending shocking sensations through the top of my head. I mean, a lot of this stuff people would say, okay, if you went to a psychiatrist, they'd be like, okay, you're having a psychotic break. They would try to medicate you, but I knew that wasn't an answer for me, right? I wasn't interested in that. But anyways, I started looking in the Bible for answers to this stuff, okay? And like, for instance, in Genesis 14, 5 through 7, when we're talking about the Nephilim tribes, mind you, which a lot of people have the theory that Bigfoot might be a Nephilim. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe some of them are, maybe some of them are not. But you have, like, for instance, a tribe of Nephilim that's called the Zumims or the Zimzumims, and they are named after the sound that they made in battle. And that sound Zumim or Zimzumim means buzzing, okay? So instantly when I read that, I'm like, okay, you've got a Nephilim being, and they're literally naming it after the buzzing noise that it makes. And instantly in my mind, with my experience of being around demonic entities and and what I've researched about Bigfoot, okay, that reminds me of the buzzing people get in their ears and the intense static that's in the air and like the electrical charge, okay? And then I carried on, and in the same verse, Genesis 14, 5 through 7, right in 5, there's another tribe called the Emims, and Emim means terror, okay? So from my experience, instantly I'm like, okay, this being is named after terror, and it might be named after terror because of the intense fear and dread that this being puts off when people get in its presence. And it is allegedly a Nephilim tribe that descended from a Nephilim being that was half angel and half human, Genesis 6:4, when the sons of God mated with human women, and they were on the earth before the flood and after the flood. And okay, well, that's an example of it in the Bible. And another example too, just out here in like Greco-Roman theology, you've got the being called Pan, which is quote-unquote a demigod, which in biblical terms is a Nephilim, okay? This being is half goat, half man, like the satyr mentioned in the Bible, okay, that the Hebrews, the Israelites were worshiping in Leviticus, and God told them to knock it off. He told them to stop sacrificing to that thing The King James calls it a devil, but the Hebrew word is satyr, and it is the same type of being as Pan. And ironically enough, we get our English words like pandemic and panic, like you're experiencing a severe sense of panic. We get that from that demigod's name, Pan, because the people back in the ancient world that had sightings of this half man, half goat were struck with intense fear and dread, just like with the Sasquatch sightings that pertain to that experience, and also Genesis 14:5-7, the Emim Nephilim tribe. And that got my brain thinking. I was like, okay, the Israelites are going through the Holy Lands. They're trying to take it back from these Nephilim tribes. And in my opinion, they started naming these tribes by the most discernible feature that these things have when they ran into them. And my frame of reference, to me, I think instantly, let's use, for example, the zombie culture in zombie movies and zombie video games, right? You have the slower zombies that someone would call a walker. You have the faster zombies in video games that someone would call the quote-unquote runner. You have the bigger zombies like the bloaters that explode. You call them like the bloaters or exploders. Or you might have the screamer, which is named after its ability to scream when it locates you, which locates in video games. It sends out that scream, and all the other zombies will come running at you like the video game, like Days Gone, right? And I'm like, okay, if what I'm thinking is true, then basically the Israelites have named these things over their most discernible feature. So when they're communicating with each other, they know what they're talking about. They're naming these things by, again, the most discernible feature that they understand when they encounter these beings, okay? And that also got me into more biblical research. And like in Isaiah, I won't bore people. I don't know how interested people are, but if you want to, say something in the comments, I'll follow the comments and I can answer questions. But there are beings in the Bible like Lilith, which the King James Bible calls a screech owl, which is a half woman being, half owl, which is like the accounts of Inanna or Ishtar in Babylonian culture, right? And a lot of people link Lilith to sleep paralysis and or the banshee of Irish mythology, right? You've got satyrs in there, and in the judgments on Babylon, and this links back to the Bigfoot thing, and the judgments on Babylon, for instance, in Isaiah 13:19-22, the names that they're given, they are called the wild beasts of the desert, doleful creatures, owls, satyrs, wild beasts, and even dragons. But that word dragon just means a serpentine type of being, maybe the type of being that pulled me out of my body. But these things are mentioned in the judgments on Babylon, that they are going to basically be caged in Babylon, right? And that's Isaiah 13, Isaiah 34, and then Revelation 18:2 sums it all up when it confirms that they are demonic entities, okay? And I think that's something, it's sad for me to get to digging in this and find all of this biblical truth that's relevant to our times to explain these supernatural events. In my opinion, this explains my encounters, okay? Now, everyone needs to take the information I'm saying and decide for themselves. But from my perspective, this I have found in the Bible that satisfies my curiosity. These beings are mentioned in the Bible, and because of some things get lost in translation, and because of general translations, the identities of these beings, they're just being called standard creatures, right? And they're not, the fact that they're supernatural entities and most likely descended from Nephilim gets completely washed over by the general terms in English that we have with the modern Bibles and the KJV in some places. So, I mean, that was a big find for me to be able to take my personal experiences and take it to the Bible and find that in there, right? Like one typical story of a black-eyed kid is they will knock on your door and ask you to come in like they have to work on permission, right? And the people there say they feel like they're being mentally manipulated, and they have to fight off this mental manipulation to say no. And they sense terror and dread coming off these beings, right? So in my mind, all of that is linked, okay? Mm-hmm. And I think the clincher for me for our times and why this is so prevalent now in our generation is, number one, because of, I mean, if you study history through a biblical perspective, you're going to notice that these tribes were sacrificing to beings. They would sacrifice their children, they would sacrifice animals, children, basically whatever they could get their hands on. They want something, they would go find a god that would offer what they wanted, and they would sacrifice something to it. And I think that kind of mirrors a lot of things with abortion that we have going on in the United States today. But the clincher on that and why this stuff might be happening right now, in my opinion, okay, you've got, and Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar has a vision that he cannot explain. So he goes to Daniel to explain his dream, okay? And Daniel is explaining to Nebuchadnezzar that the dream he had is about all the kingdoms of the world until Jesus Christ returns, right? You got the head of gold, the midsection is silver, and you go down till you get down to the feet. And the feet are made of clay and iron and clay. But it says in Daniel 2:43, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave. And that word cleave is derivative of marriage, right? They shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So from a biblical perspective, if you agree that Nephilim existed, okay, and they were from fallen angels that did it, and you understand what we're told in 2 Peter and in Jude, that these angels that came down and took human wives, and it says they took human wives, all of which they chose, they forced themselves on mankind and tried to live among us till God brought the flood and preserved Noah and his sons and their wives, right? Mm-hmm. And then the Bible says that they were on the earth before the flood and also after the flood. So if these beings were on the earth before the flood and also after the flood, and we know God judged the angels that came down and took human wives because Jude and Peter say they are locked up in chains until judgment, then how come angelic beings are able to do this now, according to Daniel 2:43 in the final kingdom, when he says these things are mingling themselves with the seed of men, okay? And I think that is basically because they are deal makers now. I think the first angels got locked away because they violated mankind's free will. They took women, all of which they chose to be their wives. And what do we got? An example of that in the Bible. Satan tried to offer Jesus Christ a deal. Bow down and worship me, and I'll give you all these. And once again, he's offering the kingdoms of the world, which is what we're talking like in Daniel. Now, I'm not saying that I believe that things like the Greta Treaty, I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but that's a treaty that allegedly...
Let me stop you there real quick. We're getting a little too deep into the biblical stuff, and I think everybody's heard verses from the Bible, or people are religious, but I'm more after like your experiences and your encounters. But I mean, yeah, I think that could be a good explanation for the shadow people and the paranormal activity. But as far as the Sasquatch encounter that you had, I feel that's different. Just because in the Bible, like you said, there were the giants and then the flood came. But the giants had 2 rows of teeth, 6 toes, 6 fingers. And they were way taller than the Sasquatch, completely different proportions.
Okay, but not all of the Nephilim were like that. Just like Hamish the Agite was a descendant of Agite, which was a Nephilim king. He was a normal-looking human being. Mm-hmm. So not all of them had that appearance, okay? And I'm not saying I necessarily believe it, but a lot of people say that maybe they're descendants of Esau. But you don't want to get into that. That's fine. We don't have to talk about that.
No, that's fine. I just don't want to, there's a lot of people that aren't religious that are just trying to find out stuff about Bigfoot and maybe a little bit about the paranormal, and I don't want to shove all that down their throat as, this is a final answer and, this is proof for everything that's going on, which I think it's good. I don't know, it opens your mind to the possibilities of what happened in the past, but for me, like, I hear all these studies of DNA and that, Melvin Ketchum has Nephilim DNA, and that's what the Sasquatch are. Or, it's Bigfoot DNA, but they're part Nephilim. But to me, it's like, where did she get Nephilim DNA to compare it with? So that kind of throws it into a deeper rabbit hole.
Yeah. But if I understand Ketchum's work correctly, basically what she's saying is it's unknown. And then the speculation is that because it's unknown, that would be one possible explanation, is that it's Nephilim or,
Yeah,
but
and that's my thing.
It's an unknown thing, right?
Mm-hmm. I get a lot of people in the comments that tell me that I'm in great danger. I don't know what I'm doing. They're Nephilim. They're demonic. But it's like, where is the evidence of that? Because the DNA that they explained was, it was part human and then part unknown. But it seems like people have like a final answer to what they don't know and to what they want to know. It's an even deeper topic. But I like the way you explained everything, that you actually had like biblical quotes, you know them, and you have a theory and an understanding of what happened to you in the past. I do like that, and I appreciate you for sharing it. Now, I know that last time we talked, you shared more experiences with the shadow people. Can we possibly get into that a little bit more? We don't have to get like super deep into it, but just like the different experiences that you've had with them, and we can talk about how you think the shadow people are maybe connected to the cryptid phenomenon, which you already have been, but like I said, I just don't want to go super deep into Bible verses when we could be talking about what you actually saw, and I think that's why people came.
Right on. Okay. Here's the thing. Okay. When you start researching shadow people, sleep paralysis, and hat men, what you're going to find, and I've been doing my deliverance ministry for this, spiritual warfare ministry for the last 10 years, they very often have encounters with like little gray men, or what someone would think was an alien from another galaxy, right? Now, I personally never experienced that. My experiences were basically what I've covered before, is the sleep paralysis, being pulled out of my body, having the very strange lucid dreams, and like we spoke before, and I don't know how much of this you want to go into, because I understand that if you start talking about certain things, YouTube will flag your video. And do you want me to go into those details about incubus and succubus, and then you can delete it later, or do you want me to avoid that subject?
Does it pertain to the shadow people and Sasquatch?
Absolutely. Well,
Okay.
basically the whole cryptid idea, right?
Yeah. Explain to me how you think it correlates with the Bigfoot phenomenon, or the cryptid phenomenon, and the paranormal phenomenon.
Okay. Once again, not to take it back to a biblical thing, because you don't want to hear about that, but I'll bring up one more instance so you understand what I said.
Yeah, you absolutely can. I just mean, correlate it with your story and try to bring up instances with what happened to you and what you've seen.
Okay. Daniel 2:43. So I won't read the whole verse again. It says, they will mingle themselves with the seed of men and the final kingdom, right? Okay. Now, with incubus and succubus experiences, okay, let's just say, for the sake of not getting this video flagged, they take genetic material from men. Now, what is happening is someone will have a sleep paralysis experience in which they can't move, and they will find themselves having to put it gently, a romantic encounter during this experience, right? Okay? And then genetic material is taken, right? And you have women, and like, I'm going to cite literally what we just seen on the news like a couple weeks ago, when Fox News aired a clip with Brett Baer, in which he was talking about how the Pentagon had released some of their studies, and they found that UFO phenomenon was linked to strange burns and a lot of other stuff, but the most relevant thing is they said, quote unquote, unexplained pregnancies. Okay. Now, in my group with shadow people that are having these shadow people experiences, like I said, sometimes they seem like, an alien gray or whatnot. These women, some of them, also experience missing pregnancies. So you've got even Fox News, Brett Baer on Fox News, saying unexplained pregnancies, but basically they don't go into detail in that report. But what they're referring to, in my opinion, are missing pregnancies. And I say that because of my experience and the women that in my group that say they had an incubus experience, they did not make it to the first trimester, and the pregnancy disappeared. And then they have another sleep paralysis experience or a visitation from like an alien being a couple weeks later or whatever, and a little gray is there, and there is a hybrid type looking being there at the foot of the bed, and though no words are spoken, they believe telepathically they are being told that this is their child, right? Now, I understand when you start talking about that stuff like that, people aren't ready to hear that. They think you're crazy, and I accept that. I understand it's hard. It's a hard thing to wrap your mind around it. But I think that everyone at least needs to consider the possibilities, because when we've got Brett Baer on Fox News talking about missing pregnancies and linking it to UFOs, we've got the Pentagon coming out saying, yeah, they do exist. We don't know where they're from. I mean, and that it factors into sleep paralysis and the whole cryptid thing. I think the whole idea of these cryptid beings and Bigfoot is a big, huge umbrella in which it's quite possible that these beings that we thought were mythical, okay, they actually exist, and we might actually live in a world that that's what the book of Revelation is. It means to be revealed. As the truth is revealed and the veil, so to speak, is lifted, and the government comes out with more and more of this information, we may come to understand that reality is actually probably stranger than fiction. I mean, take the movie Alien, take the movie Predator, take, Visitations of the Fourth Kind or whatever it's called, and mix it with Lord of the Rings, and you might actually begin to understand what I believe might possibly exist out here. Because we need to try to come up with a theology or an understanding that explains all of these people's different experiences, right? Mm-hmm. And another thing, you asked me to get into the details about what people talk about in spiritual attacks. The thing that most people don't understand that I bring up to people are the electrical qualities to these attacks. I suspect that it's quite possible these entities, when they manifest as shadow people and or like the beings of mist, that they might be made of like some form of plasma, as in plasma defined as electrified or ionized gas, because of the electrical quality they seem to have. And now my own personal experience with this, as I was going through about 6 months of extreme spiritual oppression, right? I was catching shadow beings out of the corners of my eye. My ears buzzed and rang all the time, okay? And I had a sense of fear or dread, okay? I did not really feel safe under any circumstance, even in my own home. I felt like these things could come and go, right? After about 3 or 4 months of that, I was completely wore out. I was lying in my bed trying to go to sleep. And at this point, you have to understand, the fact that these beings are around me did not alarm me unless I felt like I was in terror. I knew they existed. And when you're around them, either they're pushing that fear or dread off on you or they're not. And I woke up and I looked up at the top in the corner of my bedroom, and there is this like a cloud of like this dirty gray or green looking mist that's just floating in the top of my room. Okay. And at this point, I had no idea that other people had seen things like that, but it's actually pretty common for people that experience spiritual warfare. Anyways, I just flipped over and just tried to go back to sleep. I'm like, okay, I'm not experiencing anything. I'm just going to try to go to sleep. Right. This thing hit me with like one thing. What would I compare it to for someone to Google and find on the internet? Google, and it sounds ridiculous, but it's called exploding head syndrome, okay? That is the medical term they have for this, because so many people report it, and they have no idea what it is, and that's the sensation you get. You feel like your head's going to explode. So literally, there's medical terminology to support this phenomenon, because I'm not, by far, not the only person who experienced this. Anyways, I felt electrical charge shoot through, like, around the top of my head and down through my head. And literally, I was crying out in pain, like, ugh, and it like throttled me with this pain 3 times in surges, like, vroom, vroom, vroom. And I literally felt like an electrical charge, like I was being electrocuted in the top of my head, and it felt like my head was going to explode, right? And I've had similar attacks like that during sleep paralysis experiences that felt like it was aimed at my chest or my heart, and I felt like my heart rate speed up, like the thing was trying to get my heart to explode or something. I don't really know how else to explain that. And if I only experienced that myself, I would not bring it up. But again, these are the types of attacks that people that have no idea I experienced that, they contact me and they say, hey, this happened to me. Have you ever heard of this? And I'm like, well, yeah, I've heard of it. There's quite a few people that have experienced that type of attack along with myself. Yeah. So, okay. But,
I think there's a strong possibility that there could be a correlation between the two. I mean, a lot of people will probably say it's hogwash, but I mean, if they could describe energy to me and tell me what it is, I'd be glad to listen, because still to this day, we don't really even know what electricity is or how it works. We can control it, but there is so much to it that we don't understand. And I have had some paranormal experiences in the past, and It does seem like the atmosphere changes. It messes with electronics. There is some type of static in the air when these beings are around. But I guess kind of to explain to people what you're talking about, to break it down for everybody, and this is kind of my point of view. In the ancient past, there were ancient civilizations, and they did animal experiments, and there were other beings on this planet, possibly, like you explained, the Nephilim, and there were possibly different types of cryptids that they were experimenting on, and it seems like the ancient people had a deep knowledge on the universe, electricity, and engineering structures. We don't understand that to this day, but there is something there, and it seems like people have been here before and went extinct and started back up again. And the flood story does explain that, and the Jesus Christ story, he was here to save people from their own destruction.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see over the next couple of months too. You bring up energy and how we fully do not understand electricity or energy and how to manipulate that. And I just seen a clip before I get started this interview with you where Joe Rogan had some people on. There was a 6-minute clip on YouTube in which they're manipulating water with energy, and the water is spiraling in a line, and they can straighten it out as straight as a board. And that's just the energy manipulation. And my understanding, if you've got that now in public knowledge to where we know that we can manipulate matter with these types of energy, what do they know that they're not telling us? I think it's quite possible right now that they know exactly how they moved those large rocks when they built the pyramids, right? And I believe it's energy manipulation. Somehow, in my opinion, from what I can tell, it seems to be that there was some type of energy manipulation they were using that offset gravity, right? So they can move those things around, because it doesn't seem to me like it was humanly possible to build some of the structures in antiquity. And I know that's a type of subject that's been beat to death, but I just found it relevant that we're even finding energy manipulation and examples of it on Joe Rogan today out there for everyone to understand this is a real phenomenon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And with physics, we need mathematics and constants, and we kind of make assumptions to what's going on out there in the universe, but there are mathematics that don't line up, don't lead anywhere, or that are just blank. So there are many things in the universe that relate to gravity, energy, that we just have no idea about. We know it's there, but we don't know what it's doing. Similar to black holes and white holes. Black holes will suck things in, white holes will spit things out, but we don't really know too much about it. We've just observed little things here and there. And I think it's the same way with the paranormal and the cryptid phenomenon. It's there, it's happening, but we just don't understand it. And I think it's beyond the quantum level. Like, it's way smaller than that, even possibly smaller than the subatomic level, and we're not even there. We can't study it. So it's there, we just can't study it. And that's
exactly
difficult.
We know it's there. I mean, science basically, most scientists would admit today that basically the scientific understanding is that there are 10 dimensions, but there are only 4 that are knowable. Length, width, height, and time is what we as human beings can experience, but there's 6 more that we can't experience. So, I mean, what exists within those realms that we don't understand? What exists around us right now that are in those dimensions that we can't perceive? What exists out here that can exist in that dimension, manifest in our dimension, and then pop right back out, much like the UFO phenomenon, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And we could be looking up at the stars and be viewing the past, millions or billions of years ago. We don't really know. It's so far away that we just don't completely understand it. But with the Sasquatch phenomenon, I think it's unusual just because we're having all these sightings, we find evidence, but still there's no answer. There's people who have claimed to kill them, or government officials who have taken them in, people have ran them over, etc. But the fact that like some hunter just hasn't went out there and laid one out and displayed it for the world to see, that does shock me, because it's 2022 and we're still scratching our heads like it's 1970.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing too. Why people often go to the spiritual aspect of Sasquatch sightings, because if they are spiritual and maybe they are the Nephilim and they had angelic fathers, and we know from the biblical accounts that angels could manifest in our reality and then disappear, like demanifest. I think some people, and from some of the accounts I've heard accounts of people, you don't know what to believe, but I've heard accounts from people, maybe even on your show, where they see one running off and then it's almost like it turned into a shadow form and it shot through, like bushes and trees, and it didn't hear, it didn't hear the normal noise that you would hear if an 800-pound being shot through the forest like that, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like some people seem to think they can manifest and demanifest, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can share a story with you. It's a Bigfoot story, and I haven't shared it on my channel yet. It kind of bothers me, just because I don't know what I saw. And I saw it clear as day, but it bothers me just because it doesn't make sense to me. It won't make sense to anybody else, but it happened. So I'm out at, I guess you can call it my research area, out in the woods next to my house, and it's been a year after I'd seen the Sasquatch. And I'd been sitting in this chair just observing the activity rather than walking around the woods just scaring everything off. I would sit in this chair every day and let them come to me. Well, I'd hear these little noises around me, and I'm like, nah, that's not Sasquatch. It's barely any noise. And I'd see like robins bouncing around the woods at a distance, and I'm like, oh, that's what it is. And I'd see the occasional squirrel. Well, that was happening for about 3 weeks, and I could hear knocks around me. So I'm like, it's got to be Sasquatch. There's no way that's a woodpecker. And I'm still hearing the little leaves and everything. So I decide to sneak down this trail down to where the sound's coming from. And I tiptoe down there the same way I did when I had my encounters. I would take 3 steps, stop, listen, wait about 5 or 10 seconds, and then take another 3 steps, and just continue doing that all the way down the trail. Well, I was walking towards the end of the trail, and I heard this grunt, and it sounded bigger than a deer. It sounded similar to a buck grunt when he's in the rut. And I was like, what the heck was that? And as I looked over my shoulder, I heard this thing blow. So it did a grunt, and then it like blew, like. But when it did that, I saw like the fog come out of its mouth and nose. It was kind of early in the morning, so I don't know if that's why, but you can see the moisture come out of its head. But by the time I saw that, the moisture covered up its body, but it was like a brown figure, and I could see its silhouette, and it seemed like it disappeared. This is the part that I wanted to mention. It almost seemed like it turned into a brown cloud of smoke that just like drifted with the wind. When he grunted and blew, he went so fast, like I thought it was just speed, kind of like Flash, the superhero. But I don't know what I saw. I almost had to like rub my eyes. But as soon as he blew, did the grunt, blew and disappeared, to the other side of me there was this knocking, rapid knocking, pop 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 pop, like real loud. But it was a ridge, but I don't know. He didn't have any cover to hide. Like, it's an open woods. There's like oak trees and stuff. It's not like real thick. But I don't know where he went. He just disappeared like a ghost. I don't know if that was speed or paranormal.
Okay, when you said that it looked like that it changed into like the brown mist, did it maintain the humanoid form, or did it look to you like maybe that
Like
it was
smoke,
losing that form a
like
little bit?
like cigarette smoke, like someone threw like sand up into the air, and the wind took it.
Okay, so would you say that it almost took like a cloud-like form before it completely disappeared?
Yeah, it kind of got a little hazy, and then just like.
Yeah. See, that is so similar to the experiences that I've had before that I even got a chill up down my spine when you confirmed and why they would take that cloud form or why that happens. That may just be part of the demanifestation or our view of it in our 4-dimensional reality. But I've seen those types of things before, man.
Yeah, and I don't know what to make of it just because the year before that I had seen a juvenile Sasquatch and he poked up behind a tree, sat there for about 3 to 5 seconds, and then he saw me. His eyes got really big and he ducked behind the tree, and that was it. Nothing else. Like I didn't see where he went, like left or right. You didn't hear him run off like a deer. Like it was just gone as soon as he ducked. And it's like, man,
Yeah.
did he hit all fours and like keep the tree in between me? Like I don't know.
Did he have like the red glowing eyes, or was this more of like a normal looking Sasquatch?
This one had like Coke bottle round eyes, but they were white. They were really white, and you could the pupils were black, but you could see a lot of the whites of the eyes, and it was strange because the one I saw before that one had like black eyes, like almond shaped eyes, completely different. And
Right.
this one had round eyes like the bottom of a Coke can, but I didn't see any shine or anything.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different variation, from the accounts. I mean, I don't know what other conclusion we could draw. And another thing that I wanted to ask you, I didn't get a chance to ask you, I don't think last time we spoke. How often do you get reports of people that see that, like the clear beings? Like, for instance, the one that, I don't know if you're familiar with that 411 The Hunted that David Politis did. And at the end, the woman in Ohio seen like a clear being that moved from tree to tree, to where it's like it's a transparent being and it's clear, and you look through it and it's almost like trying to make out what's behind saran wrap if somebody was holding saran wrap in front of your eyes. How often do you get those reports?
Not very often.
Okay.
But it does seem like down to the most natural Bigfoot encounter, people have a very hard time reporting that. So when something else happens, it's almost darn near impossible to get them to talk.
Yeah,
just with a natural Bigfoot sighting, it walked across the road, it was gone.
Yeah.
They don't even want to talk about that. But if they saw a Bigfoot run across the road and then an hour later they saw a little person or a dog man, like they definitely don't want to talk about it, or some lights.
So, I think it's fear and embarrassment, because when I first started going through the trouble that I was having, man, I felt like nobody was going to believe it, and that's why I started my group, is because I felt so alone. I could understand how someone in those dark moments would be tempted to, even harm themselves, right? And I remember calling people that I thought would have the answers. Some the people who understand, the people in the Christian realm that talk about strange things might know, but I was actually able to get a hold of a guy named Trey Smith. And when I was trying to explain to him the experience that I had where I was pulled out of my body, dude, I couldn't talk. My voice started cracking. It got like high pitched. I started crying, and I didn't. It's just the emotional trauma that I had, and like the fear to tell somebody for the first time what happened to me. Like, I felt so embarrassed after that, man, because I was trying to explain it for the first time, and I broke down like a child, and I'm a grown man, and I may not be the toughest guy around, but I like to pride myself on not being a coward, at least, you know what I mean? So when I broke down like that, it took me quite a while to get back to where I would start sharing my experiences again. And that made me collect other experiences and look for more evidence. But I remember that feeling, and I believe that most people that experience this, whether it be a Bigfoot encounter or even shadow people, I think they probably feel the exact same thing I felt in that moment, and they just don't go back. They try to avoid it and forget it ever happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the people listening, I did start Sasquatch Theory due to the fact that I had paranormal experiences long before my encounters. And I always wanted to talk about it and share the encounters that I experienced with the paranormal, but it really bothered me for years. I lost a lot of sleep. It really messed up my health and pretty much destroyed my life. But when I experienced the Sasquatch encounters, I felt I could talk about it. I wasn't going to be ridiculed as bad as I would be if I would have started a paranormal channel. And I did plan on, when I started the Sasquatch Theory, I was like, man, I'm going to tell these paranormal stories too, to get them out there, because that's what I'm meant to do. That's what I have to do. But the more I get into it, it's like people expect you to be a certain way, and then if you talk about something, people unsubscribe, and you just get a lot of negative feedback when you start talking about the paranormal, but it's something
Right.
that needs to be done, and
Yeah, and
I
I
certainly
think
don't have a voice for it, but I'm glad I got in contact with you because you're a great speaker and you have a good way of expressing your thoughts. And when I try to talk about the paranormal, I get so twisted in my mind and tongue tied, and I can't keep my thoughts straight.
right. That happens to all of us. The first time, like I just explained to you, the first time that I tried to recount being pulled out of my body, man, it's like emotionally you can't handle it because you know that you experienced something that makes no sense. And you feel so alone because you feel like no one's going to believe it. And that would be one thing that I would ask anybody who's watched this video on your site, man. Just please think. I mean, if you disagree with what's being said, that's fine. But please be respectful, and I'll tell you why. Because you're probably not going to bother me, and you're probably not going to bother Miguel. But you never know who's experiencing that type of stuff. That's literally on the last bit of rope that they have, that are about to lose it, man. That may go to self harm or something. So please, just respectfully disagree if you're going to disagree, because I'm telling you, from my perspective, and I've been doing it 10 years and helping people, the people that finally build up enough nerve to contact me and talk about this stuff, folks, they're at their wits' end. They're at the end, man. They're at the point to where they feel like if someone don't talk to them and confirm what they're going through is an actual real thing, folks, I mean, it leads to self-harm. I can guarantee you that a lot of people that you even know, might have harmed themselves over things like this because they are so afraid that they'll be rejected if they told the truth. So please be respectful, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I stopped you earlier. Not because I didn't believe you or I didn't want to hear the biblical aspect of it, but I wanted to keep the viewers engaged, the skeptics, and I try to get in their mind too. So
yeah, I understand.
I am thinking about them too.
Yeah.
I had to stop you. So
Right, with your audience,
to not hurt their
I
feelings
agree with
either.
you. I think it was probably the right thing. It's a lot of information to absorb, and your audience is probably it takes some time to work up into that. I agree. I think you most likely did the right thing because it just takes a while to absorb the information to come to those conclusions, and it can almost be like somebody's Bible beating you to death. And to be honest with you, that's what turns most people off of Christianity, is because you're constantly talking over somebody's head and citing Bible verses and they have no idea what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So I understand completely.
And I was trying to think about the viewer too. Like, I don't want to hurt their feelings either. It's like, well, I got to stop him because I want everybody to be on the same page. Not that we all have to believe the same thing or I have to run and, run the topic, but just to get everybody down to the same level of just two guys talking.
Absolutely. And again, I'll say, folks, this is just my opinion. I mean, take it or leave it. If there's something that you find that's interesting in it, great. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. I understand. We all are beings with free will. We can choose what to believe and what not to believe. But I mean, at least we can try to treat each other with respect. And that's all I'm asking, And if you hear these encounters, just treat people that talk about this stuff with a little bit of respect, because you have no idea what they're going through in their mind and how much strength it took for them to come and say stuff like that and talk about it publicly, because it's humiliating. It's a humiliating feeling. It really is.
Yeah,
But,
and we're talking about something we know nothing about, and that's why we're talking about it, so we can better understand it. I think a lot of people, when they listen to these podcasts or stories, are like, oh, they think they know everything. Oh, all of a sudden this person just knows everything about Bigfoot, and it's not like that. But with the small experiences that we've encountered, we're trying to put it in a box or match up people's stories to our own.
I agree 100%, and that's why oftentimes I like to keep repeating myself and my opinion and my opinion and my opinion, because I want to leave room for everybody to have an opinion. If you've had a sighting, you got an opinion, and I'm not trying to force it on anybody. I'm just a guy saying, hey, this is what might be going on. Maybe take a look at what I'm talking about, and if not, that's okay,
Mm-hmm. And if there was a person out there that was extremely traumatized by some type of Bigfoot encounter or paranormal experience, and they were losing tons of sleep, couldn't eat right, couldn't think straight throughout the day, this topic just manifests their thoughts, what kind of advice could you give them to get through this and to put it in the past?
My advice would be to find find people that understand what you're going through, that maybe went through it before you did, or have found some ways of coping. Now, of course, I'm a Christian, so in my experience, my faith in Jesus Christ is what lifted me up out of it. And even when I anointed and blessed my home, like the Bible tells us to do, that worked for me, and those entities could no longer enter my space. Now, everybody's got, kind of what belief they're inclined to, but don't stop looking for help. If you want my help, folks, my name is John Kenny. I'll post a link to my stuff on this video if it's okay with you, Miguel. And if someone wants to talk about, even if you don't agree with me, and maybe you just need somebody to talk to and you want to bounce some ideas, hey man, I'm here. That's what I'm here for. That is my calling in life, is to be here for people that have experienced stuff that it's hard for them to talk about. I want to be that guy they could take that to and not feel judged and not feel like they're being browbeat or they're being disbelieved, And I just find that there are other groups, maybe there's other groups out there that fit your belief system. I'm not really sure, but just find somebody to talk to and don't let it go, because if you bury it, it's just going to resurface. So find some type of support. And I'm always available, folks. This is what I do. That's why I started this ministry for people like me, because I was on the edge and I was even starting to consider self-harm. And, by the grace of God, God delivered me out of that. So I know how dark it can get. And I know how scary it can get, I felt hopeless in some points. That's why I said, hey, I got to go back and find people like me and try to help them as much as I can, because I know how painful it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. When a person has a Bigfoot encounter, their brain kind of turns into a broken record where it's like it's some type of primate that's been here since the Ice Age. And then the next day you're like thinking something paranormal way outside the box, and it's like you can never just stop somewhere and be like, okay, that's what it is. It seems like your mind's always racing to different places trying to figure out what it is, and it'll never stop.
Right, and you just never seem completely satisfied until you can actually look at one and have time to observe one and think about it. But we don't have that luxury right now because, like you said, we don't. No hunter's been able to kill one of these and present it to the public. And there's just so much that we don't know, and the fear of the unknown is a very real thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me look up some of the questions that I wrote up here and make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, so you mentioned the huge red eyes, and you guys had already passed it, and the eyes were still glowing. Do you think the moon had some type of effect?
No, I don't. And it's the reason I say that is because when I was on the passenger side and my window was open and the ditch was right there, and it was right on the other side of the ditch behind a cornfield, and the cornfield just the field wasn't lit up or anything, and there was no light, in my opinion, that could have helped it with that glow. In my opinion, the red glow from its eyes was independent. It was supplying that itself somewhere inside of its being. I don't think any external light source was having any effect at all. It was like someone turning on a flashlight. It wasn't a flashlight, it was a glow. But like if you clicked power to like a glowing device and it glowed, it was glowing from its own independent power. It's not a reflection off of something else.
Yeah, that's strange. And I can see why Ohio dubs the Bigfoot as Ohio Grassman. You mentioned this thing was crossing the ditch and going into a cornfield. That's wild that the Sasquatch can just hide in open fields or cross highways and not be seen.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? Lately, as a matter of fact, I've been hearing a lot of people that are talking about how they're seeing them on the road. A few people who are on your shows, I've been going back and watching some of your old videos, and it surprised me to find out that's, you know what, that's not all that strange. Quite a few people have had those encounters, right? And like even the encounters of the one people that say they've hit them with their cars, it's shocking to me. With their intelligence, you wouldn't think that there would be so much of that. You would think that would be something they could avoid, but I mean, for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. I think technology is it's not natural. So, these things are advanced beings, but that sticks to this planet and the universe. But as far as man-made objects, I think it bothers them, like chainsaws and motorcycles and vehicles. It's just not in their nature.
Yeah, I think like the nature of man is like everything's paved, Everything's electronic. Everything's for convenience. We can't seem to really understand that there's intelligent beings out here that are not interested in that type of life. There's intelligent beings out here that probably have more spiritual dimensionality than we do, and they think electrical garbage like we mess around is just garbage. They're living their existence a completely different way, and I don't think that we as mankind understand that because we don't have that nature and we don't have those extra dimensions.
Yeah, it seems like, to me, like Sasquatch should be more natural to this planet than us, just because, like, we don't have any hair, we'll die out there in the elements, we destroy the planet, and we're just kind of like an infestation.
Yeah, and they thrive out there. They're huge. They're muscular. There's very, very few reports of these things not being healthy. So they're out there. They're intelligent and they're thriving. You know.
Yeah, they fit on this planet better than we do, and they seem to understand themselves more than human beings.
Yeah, I agree. They seem to be more at peace with nature and not into the things that we are, wanting to pave everything and just. I mean, the structures of mankind is that nature's way more beautiful than the stuff that mankind makes in structures. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so what do you think the shadow people are? If you could summarize it real quick, where do they come from?
I believe that it's quite possible that they are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, and or maybe some of them even be like the pre-Adamic race. And without getting into some heavy-duty theology, those people that are interested in that can research gap theory. Google biblical gap, G-A-P theory, and you can find out about like the stuff about a pre-Adamite race. But even the Book of Enoch would tell us that there are disembodied spirits that are left over from the Nephilim. I believe that explains some of it in part, but the thing that's concerning to me is how negative they are. Mm-hmm. There don't seem to be very many positive ones. And even, from a biblical perspective, angelic beings seem to hide more in the back because they understand man's propensity to want to worship and communicate with spiritual beings. So that's why I believe so many of the encounters are often negative, is because God's angels, on instruction from God, know not to show themselves too much because we chase things like that, right? We're so curious about it, it sparks our curiosity. But of course, a demonic entity has no respect for that. That's why I think we see so many of the sightings are negative,
Yeah, the shadow person I saw appeared when I was watching The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and this happened in Mexico. And the power went out when I was halfway into the video, and I had to feel my way down the stairs to the bottom level of the house. And when I opened the front door and made it outside, it was already dark, but there was a street lamp lighting up the yard. And as I got out there, I'm like, man, I'm glad I got out of there. That was strange. All the electric went out. A black cat ran right in front of me, and it was freaked out, wow. His hairs were standing up, all of them. And it freaked me out. I'm like, oh my God, it was just a cat. And I look to my left, and there's this puddle of black ink, and it stands up, and it's facing me, and it looks like the Silver Surfer. And it's just standing there looking right at me, and I can see it clear as day. And it was ink black. And I took off running. You've seen
the ones that look like a void. Then that's that's a strong manifestation, man.
Yeah, and it happened when the exorcism was happening in the video. All the power went out. I mean, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. That freaked me out alone. But when I saw that thing, I knew I did something wrong because it sucked the energy out of the house. There was no electric. It sucked all the electricity out of a 2-story house for this thing to manifest. And I know no one's going to believe it, but I know it happened, and it freaked me out. And that's kind of where the paranormal days started for me.
Yeah, and what is it about their ability to manipulate electricity and or need it or feed off of it, And that's something that we don't have the science to understand now, It just seems like, I don't know if you want to call it magic or mythology, but at one point I believe mankind will understand the science of these beings. I mean, it'll no longer be a mystery,
Yeah, I agree. All right, John, I think that summarizes your story, and I've asked all the questions that I have. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Just the only thing I'd like to add, if anyone is having any type of encounter and they're struggling, man, don't be afraid to reach out to people that are there to help. Be careful who you share your story to. If you're not sure if they'll accept it, just maybe hold off. But find somebody like me or someone like Miguel, like you, man, that they could just reach out to and talk to about it. Because just finding one person that has similar experience that you can relate to, man, I'm telling you, you get such an overwhelming feeling of acceptance and hope just finding one other person out there that had the experience that confirm you're not crazy. So, I mean, people like you are out there, man. If you're struggling, reach out to one of us, man. We're here for you. You know, we're not going to reject you because we've been where you're at, and we know exactly how terrifying it is. So, you know, you got hope, man. Don't give up. Don't do something that's going to harm yourself. You know, just reach out. There are good people out there that have been where you're at, and they will help you. You know.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. This stuff is happening out there, and we know it. So if you're having any issues, contact somebody who deals with it and is willing to listen. Don't just contact anybody. Contact somebody that you trust, and yeah, that'll listen to your story.
Yep, I agree.
All right, John. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to get on the show and share your encounters and experiences and your vast knowledge with all of us.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's no problem. And if you have any more questions, feel free to contact me.
Right on, I will, brother.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Yep, take care, Miguel.
Yep, you too, man.